Chapter 32. Cedar and Rita were talking loudly on one side of the store. Alicia wished that she could understand what they were saying, but they spoke in Elven, and there was not even a hint of familiarity in the language. "We need to learn Elven," Alicia muttered to her son. Kenny sat at a wooden table, one that was solid and hand-carved. Alicia had gawked at its beauty when they first saw it. However, she was not sitting at it. Instead, she was on the floor. The firmness of the wood tiles felt nice against her skin, and she needed that feeling at the moment. It had been a long day. Another advantage of sitting on the floor was that Cedar and Rita could not see her. Alicia was not ashamed of the way she calmed herself down. However, she also knew that some of her more eccentric behaviors tended to freak people out, so Alicia kept them hidden as much as possible. She sat on the floor, flexing her fingers and slightly rocking until the talking stopped. As the footsteps approached, she closed her eyes and took several deep breaths, slipping back on the mask she wore to navigate a world not built for autistic people. Her hands fell to her sides. Her rocking stopped, and she moved her body to a pose others would find relaxing. Well, as close as she could manage. "I thought illusionary magic didn't work here," Alicia blurted, and then mentally berated herself for not allowing a more natural flow to the conversation. However, the question had been consuming her, and nearly demanded to be let out. Cedar, however, no longer seemed fazed by her abruptness. "It does not. At least it normally does not." "Then how does Kenny manage it?" Alicia asked. "I think we should probably let him tell us." Kenny looked up at them, and Alicia saw that he had been drawing, using paper given to him when he ushered them away so that they could talk. It was a pretty impressive drawing of farms going up the side of a building. He even attempted some elves. At least, Alicia thought they were elves. "I know you said that it wouldn't work, but I still felt it. It didn't feel the same, but it is still there. None of the magic feels the same here. Although the other two are stronger here, I think." "Fascinating," Cedar said. "All you have to say is fascinating?" Alicia turned on Cedar. "I thought you were supposed to teach my son." "It appears that he is teaching me as well. I do not know why he can still feel illusionary magic. To me, it is like a giant brick wall. The only time I can access it is to shift out of the in-between and into the human world. Then it is released. We have to take our illusionary students to the human world to train. There is even a small school set up for the most powerful of them." Alicia glared at him. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It was just meant to emphasize my point that he should not be able to use illusionary magic. But your son should not necessarily exist either. I have no idea how Kenny was conceived. Retta has never even heard of a human and elf child, and nearly every elven book has passed through his door at one point or another." Alicia stared at her son, who was still sitting at the table and now back to drawing. He was her pride and joy. Her son had changed her life in so many ways, and all of them for the better. He made her step up, and often step out of her solitary life. She had to learn to advocate to make sure he had what he needed, and learn to navigate the world to ensure that she cared for him. Now she felt like she was failing him. They had lost their home, they were stuck in a world that shouldn't exist, and the world had gotten so far away from logical that she was having a hard time coping. She liked things to make sense. She wanted them to be in order. She enjoyed doing the same thing day in and day out. Now all of that was out the window. But the worst of all of it was that she had no answers for her son. Alicia had no way to explain to him what was going on or even how he could exist. Although looking at him calmly drawing, she had to admit that this was probably more of a problem for her than it was for him. "I do have a theory," Cedar said. "I think the reason that Kenny can use illusionary magic in the in-between is due to his human blood." "Why would that make a difference?" "Being half-human is bound to have some impact on his magic. I would have thought that it would have depleted his magic, making him a less powerful elf. But watching him, I think it is the exact opposite. His human half seems to heighten his elven half. Since his elven half is of the royal line, it is already some of the strongest elven magic. But he is stronger as a barely trained 8-year-old than anyone else alive." Alicia watched her son add fluffy, rounded clouds to his picture. It would be so much easier for her to go on pretending that this world didn't exist, and her son wasn't the most powerful magic user in generations. Even the thought made her want to laugh in an unstable fashion. Instead, she took a deep breath and moved forward. So you think that this extra power helps him use illusionary magic in the land of illusions? Only partly. I think that Kenny can still connect to illusionary magic because he is only partly in the in-between. You have seen how hard you have to work at seeing the elven world. Earlier, when you stopped focusing on the elven world and only saw the human world, you fell out of the illusion. You basically shifted all on your own. It is easier for you to be in the human world than the elven world. I shifted? You don't think I'm at risk of shifting anymore? What do you see when you look around you? I see you, I see bookshelves and a lot of books. Exactly. You see the in-between. You have finally accepted that you are here. You could still shift back, but it would be harder now. You would need familiarity, and it would have to be a choice. Although most humans allow themselves to drift back as soon as they understand they are not trapped here. Alicia looked at the sconces on the wall, each with flickering handmade candles. On the table there was a lantern filled with oil. This was not the world she grew up in, but it was one that her son belonged to, at least partly. I am not most humans. I am the mother of the elven prince, and by that fact alone, this is my world now. At the very least, it is where I need to be to keep my son safe. I'm leaving. I talked with Retta, and you can stay here with him. He is upstairs, making space for you. I shouldn't be gone long. I just need to see what has become of this world myself. I need to see what I am responsible for, so that I can determine the best way to help. We could come with you. The response was almost desperate. Cedar was the only familiar thing in the space, and the thought of losing him made anxiety crawl up her spine. Over the last few days, he had become familiar. Retta is a good man. I promise you that. He will keep your son safe. You love him? Alicia asked. Then she immediately realized that she had overstepped. I'm sorry, you don't have to answer that. Over the last several days, there have been times that you have baffled me about how little you seem to understand the world around you. Then there are moments where you see more than most people would. We will stay, because you trust him and because you think this is the safest place for my son. But what happens next is not a decision that you will get to make alone. Cedar didn't answer her. He just gave her a brief glance and turned and walked around the bookshelves. She heard the jingle of the door opening, and then nothing. For the time being, they were alone. Alicia went and took a seat next to her son, looking at the progress he had made on his picture. Well, it is a good thing we're in a bookstore, she said. Maybe we can find answers in some of them.